Hi, Srishty. Thank you for joining in, and congrats again on your INSEAD and LBS admits. That's really great.
Thank you so much, Arvind. And yeah, thank you once again for all your help throughout the process.
So, the goal, Srishty, of this debrief is to hear from you about your background, about what first motivated you to do an MBA, how the application journey, the process was, and how you have to manage your work, which is also time consuming with uh, in a way a stressful process, right? Because both these schools have a lot of essays, a lot of other components, video essays, interviews, and so on. So, in terms of structure broadly, I think we'll cover five things. One, starting with the background of yourself, where you're from, your childhood upbringing, etc. Then talk about sort of your motivation, why you wanted to do an MBA, how you prepared for, GRE and so on, how you chose schools, in terms of geographic preferences, etc. And then sort of deep dive a bit into the application process itself in terms of what were some of the core, say, strategies or unique selling points or, positives on the profile or even challenges or roadblocks, right, if any, in terms of how you address them, and then about our working experience, how our process was, what are the core steps we followed, and then we'll wrap it up with any tips or insights that you have for candidates that has gone through the process and secured to admits. So yeah, that's the broad structure. I mean, feel free to add things or take the conversation as it goes. So let's start with your background, Srishti. I mean, you were born in a Navy family, right? Your father was a Navy officer. So tell me about that. How was your childhood like? How was your upbringing like?
Absolutely. So, yes, my father is in the Indian Navy. So I was born in Haryana, but I grew up in multiple cities across India. And I had the most wonderful opportunity of interacting with so many people from different backgrounds, which also made me realize that I've probably learned more from people than I have from textual knowledge. And that was also one of my key reasons to just probably engage more with global people as well. And yeah, I think moving around seven different cities, I've shifted over 35 different houses. Anyone coming from a defense background would probably relate to this, that every single year we had to change schools, change friends, change a house. Nothing was constant. You had to be adaptable. There was no choice. But I think that was also one of my key strengths, which we made sure to highlight in every essay and every conversation that I've had with my interviewers as well. And I think I started with my BCom honors degree in Gargi College from DU University. And after that, I transitioned to KPMG India. I started as a client due diligence analyst in the forensics team, wherein I mostly worked on creating due diligence reports for our clients and their stakeholders, essentially just for the merger and acquisition, but also when they had to hire senior stakeholders in their company. Post that, I think after 1.5 year or so, I transitioned to Bain Company in the product practice and knowledge team, and started off as an associate there, worked on Bain's client classification and client revenue. Then I got promoted as a specialist there, and I'm still working at Bain. And I think both of my firms per se, they had the brand name KPMG and the Bain tag, which was really helpful throughout the process. But the things that I've learned from each firm have added more value than just the brand name, I would say.
Right, right. So talk a bit about Bain, right? About BCN. What was your kind of core role like? What are the key learnings, etc.?
Absolutely. So, as an associate and then as a specialist, I was essentially responsible for classifying the revenue that we receive from clients and understanding which team is supporting our clients the most and allocating that revenue to them. But it happens so that multiple teams, in fact, help our clients achieve their goal. So, there were a lot of disputes in general to analyze which team should get what percentage of the revenue. So most of my communications were with senior stakeholders because revenue is a really important component of almost everything: the hiring process, how many expert partners, how many partners do we need, the partner compensation, and also BCN employee compensation depends on the revenue that they are receiving per case. So most of my work revolved around solving disputes, interacting with senior stakeholders, and generating insights from the data that we used to receive.
Right, right. And you had chance to work with global teams, right? So talk a bit about the international exposures. I think that's something which schools, including like INSEAD, LBS, etc., value quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I think up until 2024, I had not traveled internationally ever. So, but I knew what it would be like because I had the opportunity of interacting with so many stakeholders who were placed in different parts of the country. And my immediate manager was in Boston. The CFOs and the executive vice presidents of specific departments within Bain, where they were dispersed in various parts of the country. But I had a on and off like communication with them regularly. And I think most of my stakeholders were placed in different parts, but the direct relationship that I had was mostly with EMEA region. And that's when I knew that the kind of lifestyle that they lead, and also how they talk about their work and their work-life balance and everything, that just made me realize that I would like to lead a similar life.
Right, right, right. Very good. Before we go on to the MBA motivation side of things, right, I want to talk a bit about extracurriculars, right? So there are two things which I think are unique to you, basketball and animal volunteer slash animal sheltering, right? So talk a bit about those.
Absolutely. I think these two were my most important aspects that I thought that I had to highlight. And you just made sure that, apart from, unlike any other consultants that I had talked to before, you made sure that these come out in my essays. And also, when I talk about it, it's not just about passion, that I'm just passionate about these two things, but I also talk about my reflections and what all I've learned from them. It wasn't just about narrating, this is what all I've done, but how to integrate that into my stories. So I'm a natural basketball player, and I think that just made me realize that being around a team makes me more productive and happier and helps me lead a successful life in every way. Because, again, learning so much from people is really important for me. And animals, the first memory that I have of myself is with me just relaxing around animals. So they've been a very important part of my life. And up until all my early 20s, every single year and every single day has mostly revolved around work and then animals. And I've of course learned a lot about it. There have been emotional days, but there have also been successful days when I've been able to get a dog or a cat adopted or rescued and fostered them.
Right, right. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a great point that you brought in, right? Which is that it's not just the extracurriculars on what you did, or sometimes not just even the impact, right? It's also how it shaped you, right? What did you learn? How did you sort of overcome obstacles through that process? Because nothing is easy, right? And especially in topics like animal shelter and so on. So let's shift gears a bit on the MBA motivation side, right? So what was when did the thought of an MBA come to your mind, right? And why did you want to pursue an MBA? Because you are in consulting and outside of, let's say, more traditional domains, that's something that a lot of folks aspire doing even post MBA, right? So what was the trigger point? What motivated you to do an MBA?
Absolutely. So, like any other Indian family, my parents have been very pushy about me pursuing an MBA right after graduation. But I felt like I needed to first understand the kind of work that happens in different domains before I go for an MBA. And in 2022, when I joined Bain, I had a chance to attend a meeting sort of with someone who was just going for their INSEAD MBA. And up until then, I didn't even think of pursuing an international MBA because the first thought that came up to my mind was it's really expensive, and what it only the cream layer of our generation would get that opportunity to go for a MBA that is that prestigious. But I still thought that I would start with my CAT and my GMAT journey. I just realized that CAT and GMAT were not something that aligned to me specifically. The style of the exam did not suit my strength, and that's when I shifted to GRE and started thinking of other options. Um, I would say INSEAD was the only top school that I came to you with that I was like, this is what I know, and this is for sure what I want to apply for. And the first question that you asked me was again, why MBA? And my answers were very scattered and I was all over the place. But I think the topmost reason that I've realized is people. Like I said, I've grown up in various cities and states, and that made me realize that I learned so much from people and I've had that kind of exposure. And just expanding it to a global level would be really helpful for me to get better in a lot of soft skills as well. Secondly, like you said, I'm already in the consulting world, I would say, but I was still doing operations related work. I was helping the client teams and our clients achieve their goals and was working essentially within Bain and deciding the revenue within Bain. But I didn't have the entire consulting toolkit to just transition from an operations job to a front end consultant. And again, just a combination of these two things made me realize that having an MBA would A, help me with the soft skills that I feel I lack in, B, get the
Right.
networking that I need with people, and C would be just to get the toolkits for consulting and impact consulting.
And what about INSEAD specifically? I mean, in terms, and I know you visited the campus, the Singapore campus also, right? A couple of months before the application deadline. So, why specifically INSEAD? And also during the campus visit, what were some, things or insights that you gained?
Right. Like I said, INSEAD was the first one that I actually knew of. Of course, London Business School, and I honestly nobody in my family has ever even traveled abroad or even thought of pursuing an education internationally. So I had very limited knowledge on the number of schools that are there, what is the kind of education that is provided there, and how is it different from our regular Indian education system. So INSEAD, London Business School, and Harvard were only the top three that I knew. And when I started doing my research, I just realized that INSEAD is one school which doesn't just focus on your academics per se, but it's your overall personality as well. About, of course, the extracurriculars, how it's not about dramatizing or victimizing every bad thing that has happened to you, but also how you've learned from it and how you've grown as a person. And I wanted to be in a school who would value my hardships, but also understand the kind of person that I've slowly become over the last 25 years. So INSEAD was my top priority because of that. And of course, because it's a 10-month program, I thought I would get back to earning sooner. And that just made me more comfortable in terms of the financial bit. And sorry, what was the second question?
Yeah, on the campus visit to the
On the
Singapore
campus
campus.
visit, yes. I think that was the most important experience that I had while researching. Because, of course, I think I've been good with my research. I've listened to podcasts for various schools, I've read a lot of articles, but just visiting the campus made me realize the kind of people that I'll actually be studying with. Because I got to talk to the admissions committee and they explained points which were not available online anywhere. Either you go talk to alums, and of course, people are generally busy. They might not have that much time to explain every single thing that went wrong or went good in their journey. But the admission consultant, they made sure that we knew what we are getting into. It wasn't just all the good things that, oh, look at the building, it's so beautiful, this is where you'll study. It wasn't the glorified things, but it was also the intense things. And just a small little advices that they were providing, like somebody said that the dean of the college asks students on the first day to wear your watch on the other hand every other week, so that you never get comfortable with what is the normal, which is a norm. So I think that really struck to me. Then the Freddy's Bell and the entire concept of just helping each other and being there for your peers as well. That was just something that I resonated with because I don't want to compete. Of course, all of us will be competing with each other in different domains, but I wanted to be around people who would actually support me to become and achieve the things that I want to achieve.
Right. Right. And I think great point also on the application process itself for NCR, which is the next topic that I wanted to discuss, is NCR and also LBS for that matter have a number of essays, right? So the advantage is you get to show a lot of your profile, but it's time consuming and it's sometimes painful to cover a lot of ground. So let's talk about that. I mean, in terms of the application process itself, once you decided the schools, once the GRE was done in place, etc., what were the core, let's say, strengths or areas or USPs, so to speak, that you had in your mind, and even during our discussions that you felt helped through the process? And on the other hand, also, what were some of the roadblocks or challenges that you faced during the process?
Right. I think in terms of strengths, already talked about, like I had a slightly diversified profile in a sense that I had exposure from living in different parts of my country and I knew how to interact with different people. B, just having the global stakeholders all over me who were like supporting me and helping me get better each day, especially at work. That really helped. Again, my extracurriculars were not just to show that I'm passionate about something, but they led to something critical, something that the schools would get to know about me. Let's say from basketball, they got to know about the teamwork and how I function well with teams and people. From the animal sheltering and the rescuing kind of work, they got to know my emotional side as well. In fact, in my interview as well, most of the questions were related to these two aspects rather than my professional journey. So it just showed that even the people who are interviewing, they want to know who you are as a person. And because the essays were so long and intensive, I would say, it made it gave me a lot of space to explain who I am and why I have done all of these things and what I've reflected on by doing these things. But again, each school, like in NCERD, essays were very different from LBS essays. The structure was essentially same, the content was same, but how we phrased it for each school, like even now when I read both of my essays, they bring out a different version of me, and that is the version that the school wanted in a candidate that they would take. And in terms of roadblocks, I think there were quite a few. A, just having working at a consulting firm was the timelines were very tight, and we started the application around July, August. So I had very less time to write down all my essays. And during this period as well, I think I was sick a lot of times in the last 1 year. Even before my interviews, I was admitted for a week where I couldn't speak. And I remember I was so tense that I was just texting you that, oh my God, what if they don't postpone my interviews? What if I'm not able to speak on my during my interview? So there were roadblocks in that, and also because my math is not great, and that's something that I knew, which is why I shifted from CAT to GMAT to GRE, because I knew that I had a very different strength, and it wasn't like a regular mathematic quantitative aptitude that I wanted to showcase. So I think there were a few, yeah, these were the roadblocks that I thought would. Um,
Yeah, and I think it's an important point, right? In the sense that I mean, no profile is perfect. There's always
Absolutely.
pros and cons. So for someone, for example, who has a great quant, maybe they have, a lot of challenges elsewhere, right? And it's, as you said, rightly, it's about sort of bringing out a holistic version of you, right, through the canvas, so to speak. That's the overall application and the number of essays on the application. So, Srishti, let's talk about the working process, right? So, but before that, so I still remember the first email that you sent me. It was super well written, and I think it was, uh, you had self-introspected quite a bit, right, on what is it that you wanted to do, how your journey was, etc. So what is it that you were looking for in a consultant slash mentor, right? Let's start with that.
Right. So I think as soon as I was done with my GRE, I made sure that I talked to a few other consultants. And I think every other consultant that I talked to, they referred to my extracurriculars as extracurriculars. They just thought that, okay, you've done this, like, great, but what about the working bit? Like, this is what is most important to schools. And with you, I had a different equation. Like, you acknowledge the kind of work that I've done apart from my professional journey. And I was very clear that I want to go to a school that would consider me as a whole because of my interest and also because of my professional journey. Like, I wanted a school that would value a combination of both. And since day one, you made me feel you made it like you didn't treat them as just extracurriculars that would be on paper. You just understood every conversation that we had. You understood why I did certain things and how it helped me. And I remember a lot of our sessions were also sort of like therapy sessions because I would tell you about all the bad things that have happened with the animals that I've taken care of and how they got to me emotionally and the things and the negative part of my experiences as well. But you never downplayed my emotional quotient at all. So I think that's what I really wanted to look at. And the second thing would be just having everything on paper. I think I'm a person who wants to jot down everything, which is why my email to you was really extensive because I wanted you to know everything about at least something about me before we start with this journey. And I wanted to understand how you would soak in all the information that I'm providing. So I think these two things were very different from all the other consultants that I talked to. And you didn't force me to apply for multiple colleges because I was upfront that I have few financial constraints, and I felt like if I want to apply, then I only want to get into the best schools, and otherwise from the other schools it wouldn't value as much. And you made sure that we had a plan A, plan B, plan C, and just again, coming from a naval background, everything has to be written on paper, and just like the discipline, like you kept me in charge and accountable of every single action that I was planning to take.
Right. And yeah, I mean it's both ways, right? So in the sense that I think you were pretty exhaustive in terms of the points or the pointers. I think it was more about structuring how to position what in, in what essay, right? Because there's like 7 or 8 essays, let's say in NCR, and then maybe
Yeah.
slightly more at LBS and so on. So let's talk a bit about that in terms of both the CV and then the essays. So about our working process, what it was like, how, it helped you and so on.
Right. I think I wanted to add another point because a lot of my friends were also applying for the colleges that I was applying for, and along with other colleges. And their consultants, for example, for their interviews or their essays, they would give them pointers as to what would look good on for that particular school. And that for me was a red flag in some way because I felt like that was not authentic. And no matter what, even if my few stories were very simple, you never forced me to fake something or write something which is dishonest.
Yeah,
So the authenticity part of it and just understanding my story and bringing out the best version of that story is what you did. And I think that's one of the major reasons I was able to get my interviews from all the three colleges that I applied to. Right.
right. Right.
In terms of the CV, I think when I brought my CV to you, my CV was all over the place. It only had the things that I had done. And it also made me question as to, okay, maybe this is why I wasn't able to transition after Bain because my CV was so rigid and it didn't have the numbers, it didn't have why I did what I did and what it led to. It only had the quantitative and just like a regular CV up. And then I also realized that an MBA CV is quite different from a regular CV that you send out to hiring managers. And I think we had a lot of iterations for my CV. We had like 7, 8 versions. And after every single version that I sent to you, I was pretty confident that, okay, this is probably the best CV that I've made. And it would come back with so many comments. And all of those comments were intensive, but also helpful in such a way that I thought of it from the other person's view. I understood that, okay, maybe I've written this number, but why is it really important in my CV? So you made me realize how to think from their perspective, the admission committee, and what they're looking into. So the CV process was, I think, the final CV that we have right now, I was pretty happy with it, and it has helped me even make it better for even if I want to transition after Bain. And in CV specifically, because my role in Bain currently is very niche, it is not present in a lot of management consulting firms or any other firm. So to analyze and to understand the kind of work that I do and how to put it on paper was very challenging, but I think we did a great job on that as well.
Right.
Um, in terms of the essays, I think again, LBS essays were we had 10 iterations for that. INSEAD essays, we had like around 7, 8 iterations for INSEAD specifically, but none of the content was copy pasted and it wasn't polished in a way that you never made it sound like, okay, this is what we've already written, let's reuse this. It was always about understanding what the school requires from you, the kind of storytelling and narration that they want you to explicitly show in your essays. And every essay brought out a different, like a different strength of mind. For example, in INSEAD essay, there was one question about your some negatives. I can't remember the question, but it was something about something.
The stressful situation, I
Yes,
think, right?
yes,
Yeah.
the stressful situation. And I remembered one situation which was very critical, and I wrote down everything that happened. I felt like I was writing it chronologically, but you made me realize that this might come off as you are not great with handling stressful situations or people. And you also made me introspect as to do you have any other situation. But then I felt like that this was the best story. Maybe we could frame it in in some other way and bring out what challenges I faced and how did I overcome those. And that specific essay took a lot of time, but you did not force me to change my situation to something which was easier to phrase or something which would not give out a wrong impression to the committee. You let me be authentic, and we worked on that particular situation and we understood the reflections more and insights from that. So I think that particular essay, I was really happy after reading it. I've been rereading all my essays even after submission, because it just feels like seeing it live on paper that, okay, I've done this. But the questionnaire that I had written earlier, the one that you sent initially, was so long and intensive. I think I wrote every single thing that happened, good and the bad things also that happened in my life. But from that version to what we have sent out to schools, it was a drastic difference in a way that how I was narrating, the tone of narration also changed. It wasn't about victimizing that, oh, this bad thing happened, oh, or maybe I'm great because I did this fantastic thing, but it was about a holistic experience of who I am.
Right. Right. Great. Sounds good. So let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about your interview experience at NCR, two alumni interviews, right? So
Yeah.
talk about how the process was, how what topics were covered, and how your experience was. I remember, I think after I don't know, first or the second, you felt a bit stressed, right? That it wasn't as you know straightforward or thing as you hoped it to be.
Absolutely. I think the even the video essays, I think it's for me, it's very easy to talk to someone, but the video essays were very difficult in a way that I felt like I'm just recording myself, and recording or clicking pictures is not something that I'm good at all. So speaking to a computer was even more scary because I didn't know where, and I had like 1 minute to think and 30 seconds to speak about something. Even the video essays, I think we practiced a lot. You gave me a lot of questions in an intensive like list where I would go through and understand the kind of questions they would ask me. But in terms of the personal interview, the first interview with INSEAD alum, their video was off in the first interview because they were traveling, and it was very cut to like, okay, this is what I want to know. It was sort of like a checklist as to, okay, this is what I really want to know. It was conversational in a way that she tried to understand where I come from. But after the second interview, I was terrified, and I think I wrote a long message to you as well that it was not conversational. I was so scared. Because in both the interviews, they made sure that they didn't want to know much about my professional journey, but they asked me such abstract questions about my personal life that I'd not even thought that they would ask in an MBA interview. They asked me about what are my negatives as a person, and how do I behave in stressful situations. And I had to give them a personal example rather than a professional example. And it was more of like a stress testing interview because they they were trying to get on my nerves and just get a reaction out of me. But I think you had trained me well before that to just, no matter what they bring to you, just stay calm and focus on answering the question. It may not be absolutely right, but just answer the best that you can. And they touched on very sensitive topics about my animal related journey, and why do I want to pursue an MBA in 2025 when the market is haywire. The whys were more important than the pointers that I thought I would speak. And even the unscripted um, speaking was essentially very important because I had not prepared all of these points at all. I had no clue that they would ask me about what is faith to you, and what do animals mean to you. I didn't think of all of that, but because we've had these conversations for the past few months and you've asked me to introspect on these specific pointers, it was very conversational. It was very easy for me to talk to them.
Right. And I think sometimes what I also notice is, your self-assessment of how the interview went is not always, how they felt, right? Because sometimes maybe, she said, could be sort of stressful or sort of pushing you to a corner just to, stress test you, right? If you're sure, if you can think on the feet and so on. And that's something that I noticed maybe even with INSEAD this time, a couple of candidates, is they actually felt the interview didn't go as well as they had hoped it to be for whatever reason. I mean, it was stressful or, there were questions which they hadn't prepared for, but pretty much all of them turned out well, right? They received the admit. So that goes on to show it's more, can you, be natural, conversational, are you honest and, versus let's say getting stressed out or something along those lines, right? If that situation has to come up. Right. Okay, great. So let's wrap this up, Srishti. So what are your top, let's say, three tips or pieces of advice for folks that are applying to B schools, including INSEAD and LBS?
Um, I think first would be to just know yourself and your journey really well. Just having everything written down really helped me. And understanding the whys, I always thought of just writing down points that this is what I've done, but I never understood the reason behind what I've done. It wasn't, it felt like this is where life led me rather than what my intention was to do. So, knowing your story really well is really important. Knowing the themes that you want to bring out. I think you told me this in multiple interviews as well, that there are few buckets and themes that I should take care of, that I should remember, that no matter what the question is, I also try to like at the end of the interview, I should know that these themes have come across to my interviewer and they are aware of that. So just having those three, four top strengths and weaknesses will help you get to that stage. And not every story is great. Not everything that you've done in your life is something that you will talk about. But understanding those four top key strengths will help you think about them and just like portray your true version. Again, the second one I think it would be being authentic. Like, and I know a lot of people who've tried to put something like in somebody was asked about it, tell me about yourself. Tell me about a time when you had to face a stressful situation at work. They could have talked about something that has actually happened, but their consultant gave them a brief note of this is a great situation to talk about, so use this. But it happened so that the interviewer already knew of that situation because it wasn't personal. And I didn't have to, I think my interviewers were very engaging because everything that I said was honest, and it wasn't something that somebody else would be able to copy paste. It was true to who I am. So I think just
Right.
being authentic is really important, and yeah, just bring out the best of your for both the personalities. Focus more on your professional journey for sure, but also take care of your personal interest and how you take like bring them out. Because in both of my interviews, nobody asked me about my work at Bain. How is it? They asked me about abstract questions as to what is spirituality and fate to you. Like you cannot think of this answer, you just have to be honest.
Right. Right. Great. Thank you again for your time, Sri, and all the best. A great time, I think.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think another point I would like to add is finding the right kind of people, the who would
Mhm.
read your essays, because it. I think every single time you sent me comments, of course there were a lot of comments because I'd just like written down everything here and there. But the way that you asked me to think about certain things, it not only helped me in my essays but also made me realize a lot of things about myself. So just finding a right consultant, I think it's really, really important. I never thought that I would like I would want someone to look at my entire life in this view. But with working with you, it just made me feel much more confident about every single step that we were going through. Even if it were the scholarship essays that you reviewed, even if I had multiple questions on WhatsApp, any day or time you and your team were available. So I think finding the right consultant who you don't have to follow up with is extremely crucial for your own mental peace.
Right. Thank you. And yeah, it's my pleasure working with you, and all the best again.
Thank you so much, Arvind.